What's up, guys? So I wanted to create a video and talk about World of Warcraft. I wanted to talk about why I think the popularity of the game has declined, and why I don't think the game will recover the popularity that it used to have. So to give you some background, I began playing back in 2004, and I played all the way through vanilla up to the last year of Burning Crusade. One of my friends quit in 2008, so I followed soon after him and unsubscribed before the Wrath of the Lich King release. In my years playing, I leveled several characters up to the level cap. I leveled the Mage, Warrior, Warlock, and Priest to 60. In Burning Crusade, I leveled the Mage to 70. As I look back on the years I put in the game, do I think that my time was well spent? In short, yes. I think that the time I played the game was a golden age in gaming history, and I wouldn't want to trade that experience away. The relationships that I formed playing the game almost 10 years ago, I still keep today. And I keep in contact with people today who I met back in 2006 and 7. That's a pretty significant claim to make about a computer game, that it's able to produce connections and relationships that are as enduring as that. If we look at the game now, however, we find it's very different from the game it used to be. When I resubscribed briefly for the Cataclysm release, when I returned again for Warlords of Draenor, I found I wasn't able to build the same kindness of relationships that I had when I was playing the game almost a decade ago, and that made me not want to stay. If we look at how the game is doing today, it looks like it's lost most of the appeal that it used to have. World of Warcraft no longer draws the number of people, the long hours, or the level of engagement it used to. So why is this? I have a number of thoughts about this, but the central reason, I think, is due to community. The sense of community has changed dramatically since when I was playing the game. And I think this is the reason why people don't stay after a new expansion comes. Because they don't develop the social connections that they used to, and having players make those connections is so critical to the success of a game like this. So to go into more detail, I think Blizzard added a number of features over the years that were supposed to make the game better, but had the unintended effect of taking the community experience out of the game. So some of these features were cross-realm functionality, group finder, raid finder, and phasing. Blizzard also reduced the need for crowd control, made content require less coordination, and incentivized people to rush to the endgame. So I want to talk about each of these one by one, and begin by talking about leveling. So after Cataclysm released, Blizzard focused most of its development time on the endgame, and encouraged people to reach the level cap as quickly as possible, for example, by adding heirloom gear and paid instant character boosts. However, this had the effect of emptying the different zones in the world. Now, when you make a new character on WoW, you will not see one other person leveling, or get to talk to one other player before reaching the level cap. It used to be that when you would go through a zone, it was hard not to make one or two friends in each, whether it was Westfall, Elwyn Forest, Darkshire, or elsewhere. And there was an incentive back then for you to make those connections, because you would need those people later on to complete content with. Now, you literally don't see any other people when you're out in the world, and this is a problem, because this game is supposed to be called the World of Warcraft. So if there aren't people out and doing things in the world, then it isn't living up to its name. There are things about the modern game that I like. I think the graphical style is excellent. I think the game looks excellent visually. It's very good looking, it's stylish, it's beautiful to play. The animations and the classes and the environments look great. I think that spells have improved. This is my personal preference. I think that spells, in contrast to older versions of the game, are markedly better. They look better. Every spell and ability has a purpose behind it. And I feel it's really satisfying to choose a specialization and actually have a set of clearly defined abilities where everything in your spellbook has a role. So these are areas where I think the game is fine, and it's even improved. But the more important areas of a game like this are its social area. And this, unfortunately, is where the modern World of Warcraft has declined. With Dungeon Finder, for example, you'll queue for a dungeon, be grouped with 4 other people who you've never seen before, and after the dungeon ends, never see again. You'll clear through the whole dungeon without ever having to say a single word, without having to coordinate or plan, or develop a concept of what you're doing. I've run dungeons in current WoW, and there's a temperament where people want to clear through the dungeon as fast as possible. They don't want to talk, they don't want to wait. People will leave the group if something goes wrong. They don't want to have to stop and develop a relationship with the other people in the group. And in their defense, there isn't a reason to, because once the dungeon ends, You'll never see those people ever again. But this creates a major problem. Back in older versions of the game, yes, you had to keep advertising in chat that you were looking for group mates. And this, it's true, wasn't a fun experience. But at the same time, it created an incentive for you to get to know people, make connections, and add people to your friends list to make the process go faster later on. The old system valued player ability more. If you group with someone who was great at playing their class, an excellent tank or healer for example, or a great utility class, you had a reason to add them to your friends list and get to know the player personally, as you could bring them along later for content you needed to complete. So the current system disincentivizes relationships and doesn't force you to make the connections you used to require to progress through the game. And this is a problem, because you need players to make those connections in order for them to keep logging in and returning to play a game like this. The other thing I don't agree with them taking out of the game is situations where you need to use crowd control. And this happens so invisibly, I wasn't even aware of it until years after it happened. This was such a huge design change, I'm surprised it never became a popular issue. So they didn't actually take crowd control spells out of the game, but they took most of the situations where you needed them and got rid of them. And looking back, I think it came with the Cataclysm expansion, when they rebalanced all the mobs, made the attributes of everything a lot more streamlined, and this got rid of crowd control. It used to be back in the original game, when you were leveling if you pulled more than one mob, you were likely going to die. So keep in mind that was against normal mobs, never mind elites, so you needed to use crowd control, otherwise you weren't going to be successful. In the modern game, and I've run several different dungeons, the tank just rushes forward, pulls everything, and then you kill everything using area of effect. There's no coordination or planning. You don't need to talk, you don't need to plan, and this is yet another way the game has attacked the idea of developing relationships. Another side of crowd control is it helped create a role for every class in the game. Some of the most iconic spells of classes were the crowd control abilities. Mages had Polymorph, Rogues had Sap, Priests had Shackle, and Warlocks had Banish. These were things that defined each class and gave them a role depending on the situation. But this also applied to everyone, and not just for crowd control. When you were in a group, whatever class you were, everyone had a role to play, and this made you feel important and invested with your group mates. Everyone was depending on you, and you were depending on them to make it through the content. Now, you just steamroll your way through dungeons, and it isn't very engaging. Crowd control isn't the only thing Blizzard got rid of. They also got rid of the utility spells that made each character unique. An example of this is in how they took the utility from mages to make food and water out of the game. Again, mages can still make food and water, but it used to be that mages had the best water in the game. So you used to have an incentive, back in older versions of WoW, to send a message to a mage in Ironforge or Orgrimmar and ask him to make crystal water for you, because the difference between that water and the vendor water was significant, and if you could get crystal water, it would save you a lot of time when playing. Now, mages don't have any of that utility. All the food gives you buffs now, so it disincentivizes the point of mage food. You just buy food and water that's as good as the mages, so you don't have to rely on a human player anymore. I think another problem with the game is gear comes too easily. It used to be, and this is almost funny to talk about, but back in vanilla you would get a gray item and you'd be ecstatic. I remember getting the cloth gray shoulders on my priest at level 20, and I was elated. And it's so ridiculous to compare that with the game now. Another big deal was the first head armor you could get was a blue silk hood made by the tailor. So you would see warriors wearing that and being excited because it was the first head armor they were able to wear. In the modern game, you do quests, level up, and you get green and blue items all the time. It's difficult not to outfit yourself in blues as you're progressing through the game. And it kind of disincentivizes what you're doing, as it's not really a rare item anymore when you're getting it with that amount of frequency. Back in older versions of the game, you had to complete long quest chains or complete a dungeon run to get a rare. Otherwise, you'd quest through the world and likely never encounter even a single rare item. So that's a big change. And this relates back to the idea of community as well. Because in general, the way armor and weapons are handled has become too spectacular. Back in vanilla and the Burning Crusade, they went with a realistic style on items. So most weapons and armors you found had a realistic quality to it, so you'd expect to see them in a medieval setting. It used to be that the first time you saw fantastic items that were really flashy and appealing or from raids or dungeon runs you completed at the max level. And because you got these items from completing harder content, this gave these items an additional effect. Because you knew that the person wearing that item had to kill an Ixia or Nefarian, had to join a guild, had to make all these plans and preparations. And because they did all this, they were able to get that item. Today you go to a city, and actually there aren't even cities because everyone's in a garrison. But if you go to a city, everyone looks equally spectacular now. Everyone looks equally fantastic. You can't make a distinction between who has cleared through different content and who hasn't. Everyone's wearing a piece of extravagant armor, and players aren't identifiable based on what they're wearing anymore. A final thing I wanted to talk about was the idea of cross-realm functionality. And this had a negative impact on the idea of community in the game. Back in 2006, you had reached a level cap, and you would basically either know or know of every other max level on your server. You'd see everyone and know what each person's reputation was, whether someone was good at their class, whether someone was funny or not, and that had the dynamic of connecting you with all these people in a multiplayer environment. The other element to this was you knew who all the guilds on your server were. Each guild had an identity, and each guild had a role to play on the server. You knew the raiding guild, the PvP guild, the guild of trolls, and each guild had a concept to it, an identity, and each had a purpose to play in this larger world. One thing I never understood is why they implemented the cross-realm system, rather than just take 3 or 4 low-population realms and merge them together into one high-population realm. As to me, that would be the best way to improve the player quality of life, without destroying the idea of a realm dynamic, like the cross-realm system did. But maybe there are people who disagreed with that, and that was why they didn't do it. So these are the major ideas I wanted to talk about, although I have a lot more I want to go over. To me, the game is declining because it doesn't have a sense of community, and doesn't incentivize you to be social anymore. You don't have to make connections or develop relationships with other people in order to be successful. You don't need to befriend a tank, or befriend a healer, or plan out or coordinate on the scale that you had to before. So that, I think, is why the game is not as successful as it used to be, and why people don't continue playing after they resubscribe. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you again.